Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome to my spoiler review for Spider-Man No Way Home. Again, this is a spoiler review and I can't emphasize that anymore. You definitely want to make sure to see this movie in theaters without having anything spoiled for you. It's truly worth it. How I decided to do this spoiler review is I just listed all my favorite and least favorite things from the movie in some random list. There's no order to this, I promise. Alright, without further ado, here is my spoiler review for Spider-Man No Way Home. After we saw Avengers Endgame, I really didn't think we were going to get a movie similar to that for quite some time, and honestly, Spider-Man No Way Home is one of those movies that's truly an event for the ages. Now, I'm not saying this movie is Endgame because that was an accumulation of 20 different movies leading up to Endgame, but at the end of the day, it had that feeling. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I felt like I was uncomfortable going into the theater because I didn't know what to expect, and during the movie, I was just constantly shocked at what I was seeing on screen. If I had to summarize this movie of how I was going into it and how I felt at the end, it was the ultimate Trojan horse movie. The reason why I say that is because when we were being marketed the movie by Sony and Marvel, we really didn't get that much. They only really gave us about 10 to 15% of the movie in the trailer. So going into the theaters, I was nervous and my expectations were kind of high, but they weren't really that high because we hadn't seen that much. But once we got in there and they unpacked the horse and we saw everything that was going on, I really was blown away at what I was seeing. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were both amazing, and I'm glad they were both back in the way they were in this movie. I don't know about you guys out there, but I've been growing up with Spider-Man since the original animated stuff that we saw on TV, and then I watched the Sam Raimi trilogy, and then I watched The Amazing Spider-Man, and I've seen all the Marvel stuff with Tom Holland. So ultimately, I've been invested into Spider-Man for a long time. So seeing the older versions of Andrew Garfield Spider-Man as well as Tobey Maguire Spider-Man was like seeing an old friend. I don't know, I just got so excited and I felt just so warm and fuzzy inside. To touch on that a little bit more, I'm really grateful that they didn't try to age down Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire. They both came in visibly looking older, and that's how they actually played them off in the movie overall, is they came off as like older, more experienced Spider-Man compared to Tom Holland Spider-Man. We didn't get a lot of backstory with Tobey Maguire Spider-Man with Mary Jane, whether they got married or what the heck was going on with their relationship, but they were obviously still together based on some dialogue that we got in the movie. But overall, it was really nice seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man kind of mentoring Tom Holland Spider-Man through all the different things that he was going through, because these two definitely know exactly what he's going through from all their different experiences, because they're all very similar. It was really nice to see that come full circle at the end of the movie when Tobey Maguire Spider-Man stopped Tom Holland Spider-Man from killing Green Goblin, because the whole thing and theme for the movie that Tobey Maguire was trying to preach was, we cure people, we don't kill people. But the one thing that shocked me and was going to irritate me the most is if Tobey Maguire Spider-Man actually died right there in that scene where he got stabbed. I was really like, oh my god, did he get freaking stabbed and he's gonna die? And thank goodness he just got sent back to his other universe and he didn't die. Charlie Cox being back as Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, was really cool to see, and they've already confirmed that he's going to be coming back in future Marvel movies or whatever they're going to do. I'm not sure if there's going to be a solo movie or a show, I don't know, but it's just really nice seeing him back as Matt Murdock. It was one of the shortest and most epic scenes when he was Peter's lawyer, and then he caught that rock flying in the window, and Peter was like, wait, how did you do that? Because he's blind, obviously, and he's like, well, just a really good lawyer. It was really funny, man. Just to kind of pick up there and talk about the overall tone for the movie, I was really surprised at how dark and doom and gloom this movie was from the jump. To me, they kept this overall vibe that it sucks to be Peter Parker, and they kept that through the whole movie, and they ultimately ended on it. It really does suck to be Peter Parker because nobody knows who he is now. One question I had at the end of the movie after everything was resolved and everybody forgot that Peter Parker even existed was, okay, since everybody forgot that Peter Parker existed, does that mean that Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker doesn't exist anymore and Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker? Does everybody's Peter Parker not exist? I don't think we'll ever get the answer, but it's just something that I randomly thought about. The action, of course, was really cool. Seeing all the different Spider-Man working together and trying to figure it out because they're not used to working in a team was really cool. Seeing all the villains and all their different abilities was really cool. And speaking of the action stuff, just Doctor Strange's overall abilities in this movie were super freaking cool. We're kind of used to seeing this from his first movie as well as all the things he's been able to do in some of the Avengers movies, but I don't know, it just felt even cooler in this movie. Like seeing all the mirror world stuff and everything kind of bending around and everything like that. We've seen it before, but I don't know, it just felt like it was a little bit more well defined in this movie. So I want to talk about some of the other characters, specifically Aunt May, because she was definitely the Uncle Ben figure in this movie. I thought it was pretty cool how she gave the responsibility speech to Peter right in this moment when she actually died. It was pretty sad, but overall it was nice nice to see him get that speech. See, that was one small thing that always bothered me about Tom Holland's Spider-Man, is the fact that we never got the Uncle Ben responsibility speech. Heck, we didn't even know what happened to Uncle Ben. I think he died. They may have mentioned that in some point or another, but it was really nice to see Aunt May at least give the responsibility speech, and I think she did a pretty good job, so good job, Marvel. From the jump, she was really a prominent part of this movie, and it was really nice because in the other movies leading up to this one, and Far From Home and Homecoming, she was kind of like a little bit in there, but she wasn't really a prominent part, so we didn't really get to know much about her. But in this movie, everything got unveiled, and we ultimately had to lose her, but that's what Spider-Man has to have. Easy has to lose his Uncle Ben figure. The other shining star was MJ, and it was really nice to see her kind of let her guard down and show her overall personality, because we really didn't get much from her in Far From Home or Homecoming besides these witty, sarcastic jokes, and she was kind of like rough around the edges. And it was just really nice seeing her show some true emotions at the end of the movie, saying that she loved Peter and was crying and everything like that. And ultimately, she really was sad that she wasn't going to be able to remember who he was anymore. The conversations between Tobey, Andrew, and Tom were all super hilarious, and I really enjoyed seeing it. And honestly, I could see a whole movie or a 30-minute segment of them just doing that. It was just really fascinating seeing them unpack all the different things in their universe. Like, for example, between Tobey and Tom, they both have an MJ in their life, but one's named Mary Jane and one's named Michelle Jones. And then also them talking about their different web abilities, like how Tobey's is actually from his wrist, and then both Tom and Andrew have devices that they had to create for them to be able to shoot webs. So it was just fascinating just seeing them interact about all these different things. Something I never thought we'd see in a million years is seeing Spider-Man interact with all these different villains in this apartment. I mean, that was one of the best scenes in the movie. Not only were the interactions and banter between Tom Holland's Spider-Man and all the villains really interesting, but all the villains interacting with each other was super interesting as well. Jamie Foxx was Jamie Foxx, and it was really nice seeing him as himself on camera, because when he was cast as Electro in the original Amazing Spider-Man 2, that's what I thought we were gonna get, was Jamie Foxx being Electro, but we got this weird, like, watered down version where he was super serious all the time, and honestly, this was the best version of him. One thing that I see a lot of people talking about is how Lizard and Sandman really didn't get much action in the movie or just much screen time in general, but I thought that was pretty good. We got plenty of screen time for them in the moments that we needed, and I think the primary focus should have been what it was: Doc Ock, Green Goblin, and Electro. Speaking of Green Goblin, William Dafoe was really good in this movie and stole the show out of all the villains. It was really nice seeing him back as Green Goblin. Not only was he much more menacing, but just the split personality was much more on display in this movie. It really felt like that he was suffering badly between these two different personalities. When it comes to Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, I was really surprised that he just didn't miss a beat between Spider-Man 2 and No Way Home. It really felt like that he was just doing Doc Ock yesterday. He really reminded us as to why Doc Ock is one of the most formidable villains that Spider-Man can go up against. I mean, he was kicking everybody's butts when he was actually in control of his metal arm. It was really nice to see Ned and MJ having this chemistry and this overall banter and camaraderie when they were on their own in the movie. But the one thing that slightly annoyed me about Ned is the fact that he can somehow now use this Doctor Strange ring thing. I forget what those things are called, but regardless, he can actually use these with no problem. I can't really complain too much because this actually brought us the coolest scene in the movie, which was seeing Andrew Garfield come to the portal, as well as Tobey Maguire later come to the portal as well. Probably the biggest strength of this movie over everything is the fact that this movie is super self-aware. It goes back to all the chemistry and interactions between the three Spider-Men, right? I mean, Ned is calling for Peter, and then all three of them answer, and they essentially do that meme where they're all pointing at each other as Spider-Man. Also talking about the web shooters again, because Andrew's Spider-Man just can't let that go. He thinks it's so weird that Tobey's Spider-Man can actually regenerate the web in his wrist. Speaking of which, I really like when Tom Holland's trying to explain the Avengers to both Andrew and Tobey, and they're both like, what the heck are you even talking about, man? Overall, when they cured all the villains, I thought that was pretty interesting, and it made me wonder, okay, what's gonna happen now that they're all going back to their original universes? I mean, I pretty much wanted an Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie just to kind of wrap up those loose ends. The end of the movie was really sad and fulfilling at the same time. It really felt like this was the end game for all Spider-Man movies. This movie was by far fan service at its best. If you grew up watching all the Spider-Man movies like I did when I was growing up, all the animated stuff, all the Marvel movies to this point, whatever, if you watched pretty much everything Marvel related to this point, you were rewarded, because at the end of the day, you got a lot of references to other things, you got some characters to come back, and just ultimately you got one of the best Spider-Man movies, if not the best Spider-Man movie ever. One final side note that I just thought about, because I just watched the Amazing Spider-Man movies recently, is that Andrew Garfield really did get his justice in this movie. It kind of tugged at your heartstrings a little bit just to see how upset he was still about the Gwen situation, and then when he was overall able to rectify that situation by saving MJ, it really was nice to have an overall full circle moment for his character. We're gonna give this movie 5 villains chilling in an apartment bonding with Spider-Man out of 5. What did you think of Spider-Man No Way Home? What are your favorite parts of the movie? What are your least favorite parts of the movie? Let's start a conversation down in the comments below. Check out my Shang-Chi review on screen right now, but anyways, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.